Do you know when to use semicolons? Yeah. Do you? No. Right. Let's have a quick look at how to use semicolons. Semicolons can be used in lists to extend a sentence, a little bit more on that later, before a transitional phrase, that's something like however, as a consequence, or as a result, or before conjunctions. Now, conjunctions are words like and, or, and but. Using a semicolon before a conjunction is pretty outdated, so we just need to concentrate on the top three. Let's start with semicolons in lists. List items are usually separated with commas. For example, our dinner guests will be, and then the list starts, Dr. Alfred Peebles, that's list item 1, Mr. Donald Keene, that's list item 2, Mrs. Suzanne Honeywell, that's list item 3, and Captain John Trimble, that's list item 4. As you can see, the list items are separated with commas. But if your list items are more complicated than that, and the list items themselves contain commas, for example, Dr. Alfred Peebles, comma, the expedition leader, that's now list item 1, Mr. Donald Keene, comma, an experienced mountaineer, that's list item 2, etc., then it is possible to use semicolons to outrank the commas in those list items. I should just say that not all of your list items would have to contain commas. Only one of them would have to contain a comma to justify using the semicolon as a separator for your list items. And that's how you use semicolons in lists. The next thing we'll cover is how to use semicolons to extend a sentence. I might also have called this using a semicolon to merge two sentences together. Let's have a look at this example. Never pick a fight with an ugly person, they've got nothing to lose. These two sentences both end with full stops, periods if you're an American. In order to get a smoother transition from one sentence to the next, it is possible to use a semicolon instead of a full stop or a period. Using a semicolon is useful to control the flow of text from one sentence to the next, especially if the second sentence is very closely related to the first. But you shouldn't litter your work with semicolons. If you overuse the semicolon, then you will annoy your readers. Most of your sentences should end in full stops or periods, and you could get away with never using a semicolon. So that's how you can use a semicolon to extend a sentence or to merge two sentences together. I should just say you can't use a comma to do this. This is called a comma fault or a run-on error, and it's a very common grammar mistake. The next thing we'll look at is using a semicolon before a transitional phrase. Look at this example. A vacation used to be a luxury. However, it has become a necessity. The word however in these two sentences is the transitional phrase, and it acts like a bridge from one sentence to the next. Other common transitional phrases are of course, as a result, for example, consequently, on the contrary, and therefore. Most of the time these transitional phrases will start with a capital letter, but just like in the last section, you can make the transition from one sentence to the next smoother by using a semicolon. Once again, you shouldn't overdo this in your writing. If you find yourself using semicolons all the time, then you should probably adjust the style of your writing. As with the last section, you cannot do this with a comma. This is a comma error or a run-on error. And this is a very common mistake, especially with the word however. It's so common, in fact, that I'm going to give it 2 crosses just to make my point. The last thing we'll cover is using semicolons before conjunctions. As I said at the start, many consider this outdated, so you don't really need to worry about this one. But it is possible to use a semicolon before a conjunction. That's a word like and, or, and but. There are others, but these 3 are by far the most common. To outrank the commas in the sentences either side of that conjunction. Let's have a quick look at this example. In fact, rather surprisingly, the majestic pike is hardly used in cooking today. But, and that's your conjunction, in Victorian times, pastry-topped pike was a very common dish. If we look at the first sentence, we can see that it's got 2 commas in. If we look at the second sentence, we can see that also contains commas. And it is possible to outrank those commas by putting a semicolon before your conjunction, in this case the word but. And that's when you can use a semicolon before a conjunction. In summary, semicolons can be used as the separators in lists when the list items themselves contain commas. They can be used to extend a sentence, or to put that another way, they can be used to merge 2 sentences when the second sentence is very closely related to the first and you want to control the flow of text. Very closely related to that, they can be used before a transitional phrase, again when you want to control the flow of text from the first sentence into the second sentence. Or if you're feeling a little bit Victorian, a semicolon can also be used before a conjunction. I should just say that semicolons can't be used for introductions. For example, you can't use a semicolon to introduce bullet points. That is what a colon is for. Now that you know how to use semicolons, don't overuse them. People tend to use way too many semicolons in their writing. If you've understood nothing from this lesson, then my advice would be don't use any semicolons. You can get away with never using a semicolon. That's all from me. Goodbye.